All right, so I am recording, and I think I'm also on Zoom. So, do I have somebody? Nope, just me. So, I'm gonna record this and try to put it up on Canvas later.
No one ever has.
So, on macro, what did you guys have questions on macro topics? In general?
Not particularly.
So we're doing money and banking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to actually talk about, because I think, you guys do different types of economics? I think that was next week, right? Like classical and Keynesian and stuff?
Yeah, we did that.
That was last couple weeks, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys have any questions on that?
Can you just explain it probably? It'd be better to hear it from a person rather than
Yeah.
a computer.
Yeah, okay. Great, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to talk about those. So you have the two kind of, and then you've got other kind of smaller, there's something called modern monetary theory, and I had a video, I had a Bob Chapman debated an MMT guy. Modern monetary theory, it's a very small, lesser known, there's the one that I like, it's called Austrian economics, and it's called Austrian because the founders came from Austria. It's not like about Austrian GDP or the economics in Austria. In fact, pretty much all economies around the world, governments, they focus on Keynesian. Why? Because Keynesian is a policy prescriptive economic theory. And it says government should act. That's really what Keynesian says. Government should do something. What's the famous, don't just stand there, do something, right?
Yeah.
I think that you might be able to call that a somewhat of a Keynesian approach. Now, Ronald Reagan said, don't just do something, stand there. Which I think is a much more rational approach to the world, right? Because it's like you have a hammer in your hand and there's a mosquito on your knee, what do? Don't just stand there and do something, right? Well, no, hold on. Let's think about this, right? I think there's like an ancient saying, I don't know if it's a Chinese saying or what, but it's only when there's a mosquito on your testicles do you realize that a hammer is not a good approach to everything or something like that, right? So you have traditional economics, which is like from Adam Smith to David Ricardo. Adam Smith he's called the founder of modern economics, even though realistically Keynes and Marshall and them are the founders of modern economics. That is the way economics is thought of today. But Ricardo and even J.B. Say, they have Say's law. Remember Say's law?
No.
Remember what Say's law was?
I do remember. It had to do with the supply.
Right.
Gosh. I looked it up a lot because I didn't get it. But
So-
it was like supply
Creates.
demand?
Yeah. And that was kind of how it's described. But in actuality, it was goods by goods.
Okay. That was definitely a question.
Yeah. And what that means is that when an economy starts at nothing, so it's a supply side economic theory, right? That is when an economy starts at nothing. So let's say that the five of us get on a boat and we crash on an island. And you guys, have you ever seen Gilligan's Island?
No.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, the Howells, Mr. and Mrs. Howell, they are, like, in the TV show, they're mega billionaires. Because one time he thinks he's going to die, and he creates a will, and he's like, I've got this land in Colorado, and you look at it, it's Denver. Right? And he's got all of these different, he owns half of Manhattan. It's the running joke is they're mega billionaires and they want something, they pay for it. And so on the island, they have this suitcase. They brought like $1 billion several $1 million in cash, hundreds of millions of dollars in cash to the island with them. And now they're trying to buy things from their fellow guys, right? But so they have the willingness and ability to buy something, right? They have the demand. The demand is there. But who cares? There's no supply, right? You can have all the demand in the world, but if there's no supply, like everybody, say we're crashing on an island, there is nothing, and we all have $1,000 in cash. And so I go to Trevor and I say, hey, here's $1,000. I want some fish. And Trevor says, well, I have $1,000 and he wants berries, right? And so we just demand it back and forth, food from each other. And who gets it? Nobody, right? Because he's like, money, what is money? I have money. I want something. I want stuff. And so when you start out in the world, even with yourself, you start out, you're born with nothing, right? And you grow up and your parents give you things. But everything begins with supply. You have to, before you can demand something, you have to supply something. And that's where the idea of goods buy goods. That is, when we're talking about minimum wage just for a few seconds there. And I turned 16, I want to get a job, I don't have anything to offer. But why do I want a job? Because I want money so that I can buy things. I want things. So before I can buy things, I have to get money. Before I get money, I have to offer something to the world. And so I have to offer them goods, or really services. Well, I have no goods. So I'm going to go and I'm going to work for, what was your first job? I said my first job was at QFC as a courtesy clerk, right? Worst job in the world.
I'm a dance teacher.
A dance teacher? So you probably had to buy through your parent. Your parents supplied something into the world. They got money. They took that money. They bought dance lessons for you in order to build up your own skills so that you could then go out into the world, supply your skills, and in trade for money and go buy your own stuff. Right? So a dance teacher. I was a courtesy clerk. You know what the skill I had was 2 arms, 2 legs, and blood running through my body. that was all I really cared about. They'll teach you the basics of bagging, and that's about it, right? You worked for your family for free. They gave you room and board.
Yeah. Sometimes lunch.
And with the promise of inheritance, maybe.
Yeah.
So, deferred gratification, right? There you go. Compensation. Deferred compensation. How about you guys? You guys
Car wash. My first job.
was what?
A car wash.
Car wash? Washing cars?
Field working.
Field working?
Mm-hmm.
Doing what?
Picking oranges.
Oranges?
Mm-hmm.
Was that your favorite?
No, fucking sucks.
Well, I've heard onions and things like that are worse, right? Cabbage,
Peaches. I hate peaches.
peaches.
Yeah.
Fuzzy and itchy.
I picked last summer. I picked cherries for a while. They have the U pick. So I just picked it for a couple, maybe an
Have
hour.
your
or
own
two.
free will.
Yes. No, I was joking with my wife. Call it U pick. I was like, yeah, that's what you were doing. You're like, you pick, you pick, you pick. Pointing to the cherries while I'm up on the ladder picking. So, yeah, tough job. I mean, I'd be afraid of falling off the ladder, and if there's bees or bugs around, there's nowhere to go. So, but you have to supply something into the world, and once you offer up, we talk about bartering. This is the idea of bartering, but even in a world with money, you're still essentially bartering. You are putting your goods or services into the world. They give you money, which is the go-between, and that money you use to go buy other goods. Right? So these are all classical economics. Adam Smith had absolute advantage, which is his basis for why nations trade. He said, but sometimes it doesn't really work perfectly. So David Ricardo came along. He had comparative advantage, which is everybody should do that in which they are best at. They have the greatest comparative advantage. That is the thing in which they specialize. dance teacher, almond machine. What did you do with it? Walnut. Walnuts are better, right?
Yeah, love it.
But you didn't bring any. How come you didn't bring any? You didn't bring any walnuts to class.
Yeah, I know. I should have. Put a bunch of your bag.
You should bring me a bag. Tomorrow at Starbucks at Noble, right? 11 o'clock? Okay.
Actually, we're starting pecans today, so. Bring
Okay.
pecans.
Actually, you could bring me some. I'll buy a couple bags too if you want. I'll buy some bags. I want to bring some back with me. So, give me your card or do you have a store? Because I'm interested. I want to get some goodies to go. What's your name again?
Alexis.
Alexis.
You might not have one in here, but I could get you one later.
You can write one up.
Yeah.
To remember the information, where to go and get them and all that. So definitely come to Starbucks tomorrow at 11 on Noble. Right. So comparative advantage again is this is how the world works. We really look at this and we say not just why nations trade, but how individuals work. Like, what do you guys want to do when you grow up? Do you want to be self-sufficient?
Probably.
Yeah. Well, you want to be self-sufficient in that you can live on your own type thing, right? But you don't want to be self-sufficient in that I grow my own food, make my own clothes, build my own house, and get all the heat for my home on my own, right? You want to do something, preferably that you enjoy, which would be, what do you guys plan on doing? What would you like to do when you graduate college and all that?
Law school.
Law school? So you want to be a lawyer?
No.
No. Okay. One thing, if there's one thing in the world needs more of is lawyers. Right? I mean, right? I mean, who could disagree with that? No, I'm just kidding.
Graphic designer.
It could be an honorable profession.
That's what I want to do.
Graphic designer,
Investor.
investor. You want to like Wall Street type thing, or
I don't know.
some kind of banker, investment banker type.
I want to get involved in the stock market.
Stock
It's like
market.
make it a hobby or something.
Do you do it on your own?
I'm gonna do it. Right now I'm just learning what to do before I start.
Okay, so there is if you're ever interested in trading currency, I had a friend that at Starbucks in New York. He used to come in and research. He'd do search, and then he'd go home and trade. And he said Oanda.com. You can get a fake account. They'll give you 100,000 fake dollars.
Paper trade?
Huh?
Like a paper trade?
Yeah, like trading currency. So it's called Monex, the monetary exchange. Yeah, it's Oanda. I don't know what that stands for, but Oanda.com, and you can create a fake account. And I actually have a real account on there. I put $100 in, and it was really 98 because they charge you a fee. And I got it up to like 118, so I made about 20% almost. And my wife did some trades, and we were up to like 130, 140. So if you just imagine I put more zeros on there, and now the more zeros you put, the more different you behave, right? Because there's more risk involved. It's like $100, risking $5 is it's not a big deal. $500, that's a big deal, right? Risking.
It's like that guy was a kid with the Monopoly.
Yeah, so you listened to that.
Yeah, I watched those.
Yeah, so that was great,
Yeah.
right? It's like penny poker or poker with no money.
Yeah.
But when there's real money involved, then people's attitudes change. So did you guys listen to that? So there was a TED Talk, and it's why the world, how the money works when there's real money involved. And they had a thing where young people were saying, "Oh, $100,000, what's the big deal? I have $500,000 in my."
Grand Theft Auto account.
So what he did is his kids were playing Monopoly, and they're like giving each other houses, and right.
Yeah.
And he's like, but that's not how the game is played. And so what he did is he went to the bank and he got, so Monopoly has $1,500 in cash, I think.
Per person, so he got $10,000.
Yeah. In cash out of the bank.
It's not.
And he pulled a Monopoly game out and he had his kids play with actual real money. And he found out that when they played with real money, their strategies mostly changed. One of them didn't, the other two did. Now they're young kids. But the winner was going to get actual $20 in cash, not not 10,000. But he did have the person was able to like find out what does it mean to make it rain.
Yeah.
Well, it's an actual cash, right? And we know, I mean, studies have shown that when people use credit cards, they're willing to pay twice as much for an item as with cash. When people use cash, they are much more conservative with their purchases because it's real. It's like cash is real. I got a couple dollars. I actually found $2 on the pavement yesterday, right over there.
Lucky.
Where'd it go? Must have dropped it back on the pavement. Easy come, easy go, whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about having real money. This is only $2, but I don't know if you guys notice when you spend money at the grocery store or something, you swipe versus when you pay with cash. Can you feel the difference?
Yeah, it hurts more when you get cash.
It does, right? Because it's real. It's like here is actual money versus swipe is I don't know. I don't feel nothing happened. It's like I get all this free stuff and then I get the bill later in the mail online. But yeah, so that was a great TED Talk. I put it in the announcements, I think, and so I recommend watching it. So anyways, that's what I'm saying. Oh, and you can learn to trade currency. Did you look it up?
No, I know. I just read my notes.
Okay. So yeah, it's interesting. So anyways, comparative advantage, back to that, is the idea that there was PBS does this special. My dad loves to watch it. I'm sure your parents probably would watch it too. It's about a guy that moved up to Alaska, and he wanted to live on his own, and he lived there for 27 years. Now, he did get shipments, because in reality, no matter how independent and isolated you want to be, it's not really possible to live completely on your own. Because he's hunting, right? How are you going to get bullets? You're going to make your own bullets? You'd have to save your grass. You'd have to go harvest the gunpowder. It's just not feasible. But what he did is he had tools, which means, again, he had to get tools from somebody else that knew how to make tools. In fact, I think Freakonomics or one of these podcasts, they talked about a guy that went out and he wanted to build his own toaster. So what he did is he went to this shop and he found the cheapest toaster, thinking it would be the simplest, $10. He pulls it off, takes it home, pulls the plastic part off, and he is, oh crap. And because he looks in the mirror and it's so complicated. But he actually went to the source, he actually melted down nickels for the metal. Melted them, now that's illegal by the way, right? So for the purpose of this thing, you probably get away with it. But he sourced out iron, actual raw iron, and he was able to melt it down and try to make something. And it took him 3 years and about $3,000 to make a toaster.
And he did it?
He did it, sort of. He said he took it to like this fair, technology fair or something, and it worked for about 20 seconds and then started smoking and caught on fire. But even the like plastic and the nickel, he couldn't really source the nickel. So this is the idea. You can never make anything on your own. In fact, iPencil tells you that whole story of how the world works. So instead of being an island, no man is an island. So maybe you want to be an island, give it a try. You know, that guy lived 27 years in Alaska until he could no longer do it, and he had to come back to civilization. He just didn't like people, I guess. Can't blame him, right?
Yeah.
But, so comparative advantage, that is, rather than do everything myself, I don't know how to make clothes. This is like plastic in it, right? It's made of oil, and it's got all kinds of things in it. I could never make this on my own. Even if I had the shirt, I couldn't even make the design on my own. So you go graphic design. So I'll just have you do all that stuff for me, right? I'll do my thing, you do your thing, right? The oranges, the peaches, what was it again?
Car wash. Well, I used
Car
to
wash.
car wash,
Yeah, so your first job, your car washed, you can wash my car. You can teach me how to dance. I took dance lessons for the wedding.
Hey.
So there you go. So we did do that, right? And you can give me almonds and walnuts, walnuts and pecans.
Yes.
We
We don't
got
like
pecans.
almonds. We don't like almonds.
And no almonds in your
I
household.
like.
So we'll do all that, and we'll all do what we do best, and we'll do it very well. We'll get really good at it, and then we can trade for others. You know, if I had to do some of those other things, I wouldn't get very much money. I would spend twice as long to get the same amount of stuff. I'd have to spend twice as much time washing cars, probably a lot more than you did, because you probably got fairly good at efficient at it. All those things, right? So we all do our own comparative advantage. So that's what David Ricardo was famous for. He also did some essays on the corn tariffs, corn laws, and why countries should trade freely. J.D. Say had the goods by goods, and he did a lot into that. You've got a lot of other classical economists. Their basic ideas are, well, they kind of had an assumption that people are rational. Now, again, this is more of a traditional mainstream idea of rational individuals. But they also said self-interested. People are self-interested. And not fooled by money illusion. Right? The money illusion is the idea that I double your wage, you think you're better off, right? But if I double your wage because prices have doubled at the same time, and you say, oh, I'm so much better off, I'm going to go spend a lot more money. Well, in actuality, you go to the store and you find out that your real wages haven't gone up at all, right? So you're no better off. And so they're not fooled by money illusion, self-interested, they have the information, and flexible wages. So if all these things are true, the assumptions under classical economics, then when we have little hiccups in the economy, that is, you start to have towards a recession, start to get layoffs, prices start to go down, because in order to sell my products, when there's less demand, I have to lower the price, right? Well, if I lower the price of my goods, I have to do something about the input costs, which would be like labor. Now, if prices of goods have gone down, and nothing happens to wages, that means real wages go up, right? So if that's true, and people understand this, they're willing to accept a lower wage, which means I can keep them on, right? I can keep them hired, I can keep them employed, which means they'll still buy goods. And I lower their wage, we get back to full employment, things kind of go back to normal. So the real wages are fairly constant over this. Now, in the 1930s, what you had the Great Depression, right? Now, John Maynard Keynes, he was English, which should tell you something right there. He can't be trusted. Okay. So he comes along, and to make it worse, he was knighted, right? Sir Keynes. But Great Depression comes along, and he had already written a book called Monetary Theory. Damn, what was the name of his book? Very famous book, because it's the basis for what we call Keynesian economics. And his book, he talked about sticky wages and prices. Now, under the classical economics, you have more of the market is much more free. But as time went on, you started to get unions. Unions negotiate contracts for wages, right? And so wages, if prices start to fall, what you have is unions will not take a pay cut. And if unions won't take a pay cut, then you can't keep everybody employed. You have to cut your costs. And so, like we talked about, right? You got to start laying people off, because I can't afford to have everybody hired when I'm selling my goods for less. I can't pay everybody the same amount. And so so you have this stickiness of both prices and wages, because input prices cannot adjust. So, I have trouble adjusting my output prices and wages. And so John Maynard Keynes said that as the economy kind of goes up and down, and so here you have this boom, and kind of simplified, this is when the government should be saving money. So during the good times, government should maybe raise taxes to try to prevent these big ups and downs. So, if there's less money in your pocket because the government took more of it, then you have less money to spend on goods and services, right? And so he said here, you could have government intervention that would affect the outcome or affect the economy. And what it would do is, instead of having this like huge peak in economic activity, what it would kind of smooth that off. It would prevent it from getting too active. This is the theory anyways. And then, if the economy started to falter, because of what he called animal spirits, that is, people are somewhat irrational in their behavior, things like that, then you would start to go into this recession, at which government could take the money it saved and it could put it into the economy. And so graphically, you had you have the long run aggregate supply curve, and you have this demand curve, prices, general GDP output, right, the gross domestic output for an economy. And what he said is, because of this, you would have a drop. He had a short run aggregate supply curve, and a drop in demand because of the animal spirits or whatever would cause a recession. Right, so that demand drops, and you go from full employment to unemployment, relatively high unemployment. So we start here, we go to here. So what you could do is government could take that money that it was saving, and by the way, during these good times, you would have like a peak in demand. So you would have a little bit of inflation. Now, classical theory said, in classical theory, get rid of this LRAS. It's just movement along the aggregate supply curve, long run aggregate supply curve, and it's just inflation and deflation. But Keynes came along and said, no, we have this short run aggregate supply curve. So changes in demand would cause perhaps a little bit of changes. Now, actually, he had a flat curve, by the way. I should kind of talk about that. Do you guys remember the Keynesian, traditional Keynesian? Oops. This is the Keynesian aggregate supply curve and then the demand curve. So remember, sorry, am I confusing? I'm going all over the board here. The classical long-run aggregate supply curve and a demand curve, and GDP is Y. This is the price level. So changes in the classical model, changes in the demand would just cause inflation or deflation, right? So it would just be movement along this long-run aggregate supply curve. Because things would adjust, you'd always be in full employment. You would just have higher or lower prices, and they would always self-adjust to here. And changes, so therefore any kind of intervention from outside that would cause a demand to increase or something would just cause a change in the price level. And let's say you had a sudden jump in demand because of changes in technological factors or changes in, you had a big immigration, like turn of the century they had a lot of European immigration. That might cause a change in demand. Well, what would happen is in the long run, supply would change. You would have an increase in the supply curve. That is economic growth. And you would get back to your kind of basic price level. Right? That was the classical approach. Then Keynes said, no, you have sticky wages. Therefore, in the long run, you might have that. But in the short run, you have this flat demand curve, supply curve, in which case changes in demand don't cause changes in the price level, but just changes in output, right? So if you had a fall in demand, so if demand fell, what you would have is you would have unemployment, right? So same price level, GDP. So what he said is the problem is that because of these sticky wages and other things, any change in the demand would, instead of causing a change in the price level, would cause a change in output. And you would have unemployment, or if you had some, from your initial point, you had a sudden jump in demand because of there's a bunch of money available or something like that, you would have maybe an overinflated economy. But don't worry, it wouldn't do anything to prices, right? That was his idea. Well, this is the neo-Keynesian model, where you have, okay, so he wasn't perfect, we would say it will cause a little bit of a change in price, but it will also cause a change in output. And so that's how they have this short-run aggregate supply curve you can see it's got that curve, so that any change in demand will cause both a change. So if we go from here, call this equilibrium, not right, demand, supply, and our initial price level. So if we had a sudden jump in demand up to here, it would be slightly inflationary, but it would also cause an increase in GDP. And so this would be like a inflationary boom. But on the other hand, if you had some people started to worry about economic prospects or something like that, and they started to demand less, what would cause a drop in the demand? We're talking about this animal spirit type thing.
Morality.
What is it?
Morality.
Morality?
Yeah.
Like, how would that cause a change?
People decide eating animals is bad.
Yeah, I mean, that would affect the animal industry, right? That would affect the dairies around here if suddenly everybody thought eating animals was immoral or something like that. Yeah, so that would affect the animal, the dairies, and that would have a big economic effect. That could do it. And what do you guys think of the future? Are you guys hopeful? The economic future?
No.
No? So maybe if you're worried about the future, you might lessen your demand. So I can give you an example. So before I got this job, right, I was working very part-time. It was summertime. I'm looking, bank account was relatively low. My wife has a great job, but I'm not just going to spend the money she makes. She spends it. She does a fine job. But when I got the job, I suddenly had a much better outlook on the future, right? And so what did I do? I started
Spending?
I started spending, that's right. So in my own finances, economic world, I said, boy, I bought the Hokas, right? I ordered Hokas. Normally I would not have done that, but I thought, the future looks bright, right, for the next few months anyways. So my personal demand shifted. So that might happen if suddenly you got this euphoric outlook in the world. And really, the future's really bright. They might start spending more, and that would boost output, but that would also drive up prices a little bit, right? And by the same account, like you said, if suddenly people, or maybe if people had a downward look, I think the economy's looking pretty awful, so I'm going to save. Did you guys remember the Macro Follies?
Yeah.
The Christmas time musical, right? So the Keynesian view songs. I view your savings with scorn. Remember that one? No.
There were songs.
Yeah, there's like macro follies.
Oh, I thought you were just talking
Christmas.
about like this rules of like saving and
Oh, it should have been a video in the modules link called. You can look it up too. It's macro follies. It's funny. It's economic take on some of the traditional Christmas songs. John Maynard Keynes. What did he say? No shoppers in sight. I view your savings with scorn. So he didn't like the idea that people would save money. Because if you're saving money, you're not spending money. And spending money is what drives. They are demand side. So this is somewhat supply side. That is, we're driven by goods. Supply drives the economy. Production. They're also over here. Production. Production is what really matters. Here, Keynesians, they're very much GDP focused. Right? So very much focused on GDP. They are demand side, you might call it demand side economists. Paul Krugman is a big Keynesian. He was interviewed a couple years ago about the Great Recession, saying, how do we get out of the Great Recession? We need to spend like $3 trillion. Where are you going to get the money? Well, he would say, it's low interest rates, so we should just borrow as much as possible. Right? Which has a whole other problem with that, because when you borrow today, yes, you pay it back at a low interest rate, but when you're borrowing money, it does reduce the amount of money available to spend today by consumers, and it has to be paid back in the future. And with the U.S. government, they just borrow. All they do is borrow, right? So they take debt and they roll it over into new debt. So yeah, it might be 1% today, but when they roll it over into new debt in the future, it might be 6%, which means a very high cost of borrowing, right? So very much demand side. They talk about sticky prices and wages. They are focused on getting people to spend. In one of his interviews, he said that he was kind of half joking about it, obviously, but Krugman said that we should get scientists to come out and tell everybody that we're on the verge of an alien invasion. And what we need is building roads and bridges. That's all that can save us. So we need to spend. Now, problem is, if you look at Japan has been doing that. China's been doing that. All these countries, they really focus on Keynesian economics. Now, the reason is it gives government a lot of power, right? You tell government, hey, if government spends more money, the economy's going to be better off. If you tell people that, they'll say, well, I guess government should spend more money. And the government says, oh, us spend more money? Well, if you say so. And, of course, they hire people. And those people, in return, appreciate that job, and they pay it back by voting for said individual, right? And so there is a lot of political... This is a very politically motivated type of economics. Now, we would say it's very costly in the long run because it's very disruptive to a market. Right? The free market, people know what's needed in the free market. If you have a blank plot of land that's not being used, the owner of the land might be waiting for a certain price, or he might say, you know what, today the cost exceeds the benefit that I can get for this piece of land. I'm waiting for the time in which the optimal opportunity comes about. Whereas Keynesian would say that land is capital and it's not being used. Right? It's just a blank plot of land and it's not being used properly. What we need to do is we have government come in, spend money and resources to build a building on that land. And what we do, that way we'll hire people, we'll boost the economy by doing that, right? But in reality, once the building's built and all the resources have been spent, does the government, in its attempt simply to build something, does it really know what the economy wants? It builds a 3-story building or something when the economy doesn't really, there is no actual market demand for that building. Whereas the guy who owns the building, he realizes, the opportunity is not optimal right now. I'm waiting for a couple years down the line, going to see what the economy needs, what kind of demand there is for something, and then I will produce that. Whether it's an apartment building, an office building, or maybe it's just a parking garage maybe, right? So the owner of the land, he's just sitting there waiting. Mises talks about the great builder. Master builder. The master builder. And it's the idea of, so you have a master builder and he's building a house and he's got a gazebo and he's got this 3-story house he's building. And, you have a question?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in his thesis on the master builder, there is a set amount of resources in the economy that are available to this builder, right? And so he's building his building, and in a Keynesian approach, they might say, you know what, you should build a really huge building. You should just keep building. But the economy might have it has a limited number of resources. This master builder, he has a limited number of resources, number of 2x4s and concrete blocks and things like that. And if he starts building a 3-story building and he only has enough resources for a 2-story building, and he just keeps building, and people are encouraging him to build more. Once he's eventually going to get to the point to where he turns around to continue laying bricks, and he's like, well, where is all the bricks? It's gone, right? And he's not done with that building. And what happens? The building just sits there, waiting for the economy to generate more of those resources. So it's sitting there empty. The resources that went into the building are wasted, unusable. It's better for the builder to what do they say? Measure twice, cut once, right? Mm-hmm. It's better that he evaluate the resources available to him early, so that when he's finishing that first floor out of his 3 or 4, and then he goes and he reevaluates the resources available to him in the marketplace, and he realizes, oh boy, I'm going to be really short. All right, so I need to scrap the plan. Maybe I need to put the building aside for a little while until I reevaluate and say, what can I build? And he says, you know what? That 3rd story is going to have to go. The gazebo, we're going to get rid of that. We can keep the pool, right? But we're going to build a 2-story building. He reevaluates. He sees and the sooner he understands the available resources to him, which would happen in a market, the better off he's going to be, and the better off the economy is going to be, because you're not going to have this exorbitant, what do they call it, the irrational exuberance of people out there. Everybody's building all these buildings, and then they have to stop in the middle, because what happened in Dubai? Right, you remember in 2008? Dubai, that's what they were doing, right? They're building the world's largest hotel, the world's tallest building.
They're still doing that?
And they are now, yeah. But in 2008, the economy crashed. The resources available to them stopped, ended. I mean, they were cut off, right? So that world's largest hotel, they had to stop building the world's tallest building. Like all these big, huge projects they had going, they had to stop in the middle. So you get this building that's just sitting there. All of this steel and resources that had gone into this building at the time were not going to be used because the building's just sitting there empty, half done, right? Wouldn't it have been better if they had realized the available resources in the economy to them were not enough to build this building, right? It's like there's the old proverb of, what is it? A builder how does it go? Basically, a builder evaluates the resources available to him before he starts building the house, right? Because if he doesn't, he's going to be halfway done and he's going to run out of. You guys know what I'm talking about? There's a proverb, like an Old Testament proverb, about the master builder. When he builds a house, he should evaluate what is available to him. That's the basic gist, right? So this is a several thousand-year-old proverb. This is not like something new, but this is new, right? There's a no. Why would you do that? You should just build, and continue building because the economy needs that demand, right? Well, it's not a very good use of resources, basically, right? So that's the Keynesian view is don't worry about it. If something happens, the government can take money that it's saved and it can throw it into the economy. And in fact, Keynes said, when you're in a recession, government, it doesn't really matter what you do. It should just get money flowing. And so that's how. Okay, did you at least see that one? The fear of the boom.
No.
No? Okay. So you can go watch Hayek Fear the Boom. Right? So even the glass man, or even a broken window helps the glass man. And so it's the broken window fallacy. So there you go. Broken window fallacy. It's a famous, the idea that war and destruction, the fires you guys had in this area, that's really good for the economy, right?
It is.
Huh?
It is.
According to Keynesian economics, yeah. Because,
But according to you.
according to me, no, because clearly burning a house down is not good for the economy, right? Like if it was good for the economy and we had a recession, we'd just burn everybody's house. Right? You should go home and light your house on fire. Okay. Then you get the insurance money, you got to build a new one. Yay! All right. So, but no, clearly it's bad, right? It's going to take years and years for the region to recover from the destruction. But according to Keynesian economics, it's great because it means that we're going to have to spend money to rebuild those houses, right? Mm-hmm. So they call it the broken window fallacy because if I throw a chair through this window, I've shattered the window, I've created a glass man job, I've also created my job, so I'm fired.
Yeah.
So I won't do that. But they're going to have to replace the window, which means they're going to have to hire somebody to come out, replace the window, probably $1,000 to replace this window, when you figure labor and everything. That's money. The school would have to spend money. It would create a job for a glass man, right? The person that makes the window, the person that installs the window, the maintenance guy's got to come out and clean up the glass. I mean, it's talking like economic boom right there, right? So this is, on the front page, it says the difference between a good economist and a bad economist. The bad economist sees...
I'm taking forever to find this room.
You walk
I went
all the way
upstairs
around.
and like, no, it's downstairs, and she's like, oh, it's right under me. So I go over there, and it's not there. Okay.
Your shirt, go Cougs.
My sister got it for me, so
Okay.
I mean, I wish I could if I could afford it, but
Well, you should, if you wanted to go there or anywhere, you should always apply and see how much it actually costs you. Just talking about price discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
Like they charge you $60. What's the cost to go to Stanford?
Oh,
Like 6
all I know is it'll make me broke. That's what I know.
I think it's over $60,000 a year.
Yeah, but that's sticker price.
Yeah.
I can't.
So
make
if
that
you
much.
can't afford 60, they're not going to charge you 60, right? They charge you whatever they think you can pay. And so in some cases, it might be about as much to go to a elite private school as it is to go to a state school. California is very cheap, though. Right? Washington, I think it's $12,000 a year to go to a state school. California is what, 6, 7?
Well, UCs are like 11. CSUs are about 5 or 6.
Yeah, so $5,000 or $6,000 to go to a Cal State.
Yeah, that's why I'm going to the CSU. It's cheaper.
Yeah. Which one? San Diego State?
Fresno State.
Fresno State. So most people go, right?
I have
It's
to
close.
I have to
Cal Poly.
commute, so I'm Twitter to Fresno every single day. That should be fun.
I like Cal Poly.
Cal Poly and San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
I'm applying.
Yeah.
I know some
That's
people
the
have
hard one.
application.
That's the hard one around here. It's like the most impacted.
Where is it?
San
San
Luis
Luis
Obispo.
Obispo.
Which is not too far.
2.5 hours.
2 hours. About Cal State Bakersfield?
You ever been to Cal State Bakersfield?
the run starts there on Sunday. It starts on the campus.
You ever been to Bakersfield?
Have you ever
You ever been to Bakersfield?
You've never stopped though.
Yeah.
I stopped at the Costco there, yeah. To gas up,
Bro.
take a break. Yeah, I know you're right. I'd say it's not a beautiful town.
Better. Fresno and Bakersfield like on the same level. That's just
I thought Fresno was a little nicer.
yeah. It's got
The
rougher
mall's
areas,
nicer.
too.
The what?
The mall's nicer.
It's
The
weird.
Fresno State seemed pretty nice. It's like a nice campus.
It's alright. I went up there for the weekend.
They're actually one of the
Cornfields.
higher ranked CSUs.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one here really cares them.
San Diego State, I heard that's the most expensive one. Some other students were telling me.
Just the same.
Because of San Diego, yeah.
I think that's the highest ranked.
But
It's either San
They have a nice
Diego or Cal
campus.
Poly.
Pretty nice. It's San Diego. It's beautiful down there. But so I was talking about the broken window fallacy and the idea that of the Keynesian Krugman approach. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, ContraKrugman.com. It's a podcast. Contra Krugman, I love it. It's my favorite one. They did a cruise. They do a cruise every year. I would love to go on that cruise, but it's in October, so, and it's out of Florida, so I fly all the way down there. It's a whole week of when I'm actually in class and all that. But Krugman is the Keynesian economist. Right now, contra Krugman, they use Krugman to refute Krugman. Like his own textbooks refute what he says today, and what he said last week refutes what he says today, and the links he provides don't have anything to do with the things that he pretends they provide. But his view is that government should just spend more money on it. Doesn't really matter what it is. In fact, Keynes said that if you want to create jobs, just pay people to dig ditches, dig holes, and pay other people to fill them in. And that's, again, the Hayek fear of the boom, is that I said, what is the difference between a good economist and a bad economist? A bad economist sees that which can be seen, which again, with the broken window, they see, there's a guy, he's cleaning up the glass, he's getting money for it, we've obviously created a couple of jobs here, right? But the good economist sees not only what is seen, the guy with the job, but that which must be foreseen, the invisible. Now, if I throw the chair through the window, what are the hidden costs? And we'll just say it costs $1,000 to replace this window, right? That means that part of that goes to the new window. So we come back a week later, there's a nice clean window here. What else has changed? So we're $1,000 poorer, right? The school is $1,000 poorer. So they have a window, they're back to the way they were before, except now they have $1,000 less in their bank account. Right, so I was talking about the fires here. So the Keynesian idea would be, these fires are wonderful. Because we were in a recession, now we burned everybody's house down, and we're going to have to rebuild them. Right, we're going to have to rebuild them, it's great. Well, no, it's not great.
Everybody lost everything.
Huh?
Everybody lost everything.
Yeah, I mean, they lost a lot of stuff, right? And the money that's going to go to building the house could have gone the $7.5 billion that California asked the federal government for. That's $7.5 billion that could have gone to anything else, right? Something productive. So if you wanted to spend $7.5 billion, it would have been better to spend that $7.5 billion on providing, we'll even say solar panels. It would have even on the houses that burned rather than just bringing the houses back to where they were. Right? So same with the window. The school probably would have rather spent $1,000 on a new computer or something like that than just replacing a window that was fine a week ago, right? So that's kind of the Keynesian approach, is that government needs to spend money somehow, and whether it's on things that don't actually produce anything viable doesn't really matter. So that's where the Hayek Fear the Boom, it says, just get money flowing. Doesn't matter what it is, just get money flowing. I forget what exactly it says, right? But it talks about you need even an engine needs a mechanic. You need a spark to get the engine going. Whereas Hayek, the Austrian school, says the economy is not like an engine, right? You can't tinker with it. Like an engine, you can go out and say, oh, this engine seems to be stalled. Let's go play with it and figure out what's wrong, and then we'll get it going. Whereas the Austrian says the economy is spontaneous. The economy is organic. That is, that it fixes itself. It's like a plot of land. If you go out, you can tend the land, but the land will on its own create things like grass or something like that, right? Basically, he calls the economy organic, which means like spontaneous order. That is, you don't need somebody to go out and say what needs to go. You don't need a central planner to do it anyways, right? Every individual can make decisions on their own. It's back to the invisible hand. So the good economist sees that which must be foreseen, the opportunity cost of something happening. And so that's kind of Austrian is, this is not, so this is a prescriptive approach, what ought to be done, like normative economics. This is more of just positive economics. So Austrian economists say this is how markets work. Now I think you can have your own personal views, that you can take this and say, if this is how markets work, maybe we should do this, do that, something like that, right? But that would not be a purely Austrian economic approach. They are more about describing how individuals behave, how markets work, business cycles. Remember this business cycle here? They would say this is because of the central bank lowering interest rates causes people to borrow money. As interest rates rise, the money they borrow, thinking that they can make money on that, starts to squeeze them. Eventually, the investment, they thought they could get 5%, and they borrowed it at 3%. Well, it turns out they only get 2% rate of return, because you're getting into a recessionary thing, or maybe the interest rate rose on them. Think of the houses, the ARMs, the adjustable rate mortgages. Right, they bought a house at a really low introductory rate. They thought they could revamp their hello, and so they borrowed again, and the rate went up, and they couldn't afford to keep it up, and so they lost their house. Right, so that's the Austrian view of the business cycle: is that this is built on interest rate manipulations. Low interest rates cause people to invest in things that are not good long-run investments, and they eventually go bust, causing the recession. This recession thing, this is like, I always talk about this in terms of drinking. Now, again, I don't drink, but think about when you go out to drink, right? You're like, I'm feeling really good. You start drinking, you're out with your buddies, right? You guys do this? No. So you drink, and eventually it starts to take its toll, so it gets sick. So I'll say, I did this one time. I wanted to know what it was like. Right? I went out, I got a drink, I was like, yeah, wow, I'm feeling really good, right? This is weird. I'm like, wow, this is strange. And then we got to the karaoke bar, and I had a little bit more. I was with some friends. We went back to a buddy's house. I had a few Jaeger. It's horrible. Like, alcohol's disgusting anyways. Yeah. So I got drunk. And then I started to feel it, right? So I was feeling feeling kind of kooky, and then I started to feel, started to get sick. So right about here, I puked. Okay. Actually, here I was starting to feel ill. Here, every once in a while, I'd have to go back towards the bathroom and like just lean over. My stomach is doing somersaults. My friend takes me out to his car. He says, "Just don't puke in the back seat, please." So he leaves. I open the door. I toss my cookies. I was feeling terrible. Okay, we go back to his house, do it again. I had a terrible night. I had a terrible week because it took me a couple days to recover. Because I felt terrible. Okay, but what is this process here? The hangover, right? This is like the recession in a market economy. You need. So what I could have done is I could have done the Barney thing, which is just drink forever, right? And then I'm like, if I drink forever, I'm like, here. That's the Keynesian approach, the stimulus.
Just grab another one and keep going.
That's right. Right? Who wants a hangover, right? Just drink. Just keep drinking. So if you look at the Barney, but what happens to Barney? He's in the gutter. He's unemployed, right? He's like the town loser. He's the joke of The Simpsons because he's an alcoholic. He never. There is one episode.
I thought you were talking about the purple dinosaur.
Oh, no. There is an episode where he gets recruited by the space agency, and he actually recovers, right? And now that he's a recovered alcoholic, he's like, yeah, he's feeling really good. He's a genius now. He crushes Homer and all the endurance, and then they give him a beer or a champagne to celebrate, and he immediately goes back to drinking. Right? And they're like, I don't understand. It was alcohol free. That's how bad he was, though, right? But yeah, so that recession is like the hangover. You need a recession for the structure of the economy to get back to where it needs to be, to recover. And once it's recovered, then you can go back you can recover and you can get back to the good times, right? But you don't want the artificial good times, like with the master builder, where he's like, man, I'm going to build this 5-story house. Things are wonderful. This is great. I've got like this endless supply of money from the bank, right? But then eventually the bank calls him and says, we've called your loan. We're cutting you off. And he's like, I don't even have a roof. How am I going to live in this thing, right? I don't have a roof. Well, you should have known that before you started building, right? You don't build on money you think's going to be there. You build on what is actually available. So that's why this recession is so important, because it is like drinking. You can drink and you can get really sick, but that hangover is what heals the body, so that you can go out the next weekend and do it again. So no. Thank you. See you guys. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye. So how was that? Was that a good analogy? Okay. So I recovered. I said, you know what? Never going to do that again. And so I know what it feels like now. Not something I want to experience. Have you been I didn't blackout drink. But yeah, don't do it, right? So that is kind of that is the Keynesian approach. You go to these cycles. Now, Austrian schools is why? Why are these cycles? Well, one reason I did it was I was at a friend's house. I had free alcohol, right? That's kind of like free money. The idea of free money. Now, there's nothing free. Somebody's going to pay for it, right? My friend was paying for it. It was just a bottle of Jaeger. I don't know, what does that cost? Probably not much. $20. And I couldn't have drank that much. I had no idea how much I drank. It was a glass, and I was just pouring a little bit. And you gotta... Oh, it's terrible stuff. So that's why I said I don't drink. I don't like the stuff at all. But the Austrians said that was the reason, right? It was this cheap alcohol that caused me to... So you know what? If I'm ever going to do it, this is a good time to do it. And so... you get out drunk and you go, now that would be the Austrian approach. It's cheap, free money, or the aura of free money causes people to invest and borrow heavily, and that gets people in heavy debt, And when their investment doesn't turn out like they thought it would, they can't pay off that debt, and they go into foreclosure, and the people that lent them the money are screwed, right? They're not going to get their money back. And so it really filters down through the economy, and that's where you get this recession. Right? And so that's the Austrian economic theory is built on the business cycle. My favorite, subjective value. Did you guys watch the Econ pop on Treasure of the Sierra Madre? On why is gold valuable? Well, on that one, he's like, let me tell you something. It's like the old guy, the famous old guy. I forget his name, but so he's like, what's the value of gold come from? Well, you got 1,000 people. One of them strikes it rich. Those 1,000 people are putting in, let's say their labor's $1 an hour. That's $1,000 per hour. One of them strikes it rich. One person, he gets 1 ounce of gold for every hour. That ounce of gold represents not only his labor, but the labor of all the other 999 individuals. And therefore, that's where the value of gold. Well, no. Gold comes because people value it. Right? But labor theory of value goes back to classical economics, but Marx was very much into labor theory of value. And actually I can get into that too in a little bit. But Austrians are focused on subjective value. That is, the value of an object comes from what people will offer for it. Right? So where does the value of a walnut come from?
How much people want it?
How much people want it, yeah. Right? So in Chinese tradition, they like to eat things that, like they like to eat walnuts because walnut looks like a brain.
Yeah, because it's healthy for the brain.
Yeah, it is healthy for the brain, right? But it also looks like a brain.
That means it's gotta be healthy.
That means it's good for the brain. I tease my wife because she's like, everything, all this stuff, oh, good for your skin. I'm like, oh yeah, good for your skin. Everything's good for the skin. I mean, what is not good for your skin? You eat all kinds of stuff. It's all good for the skin.
That's like their biggest selling point in China. That's how they sell.
Good for the skin?
No, it's good for the brain.
Oh, good. Yeah. The walnut or
the walnut?
Walnut, yeah.
Yeah. And actually, there's a new hybrid of a red walnut that they're trying to sell in China because in the Asian culture, red's a lucky color. It's like an extremely lucky color. So they bred this red walnut in order to sell it to Asian countries as a premier luxury of luck.
Yeah, and again,
Listen with the Chinese and get obsessed with luck.
it's because the number 8. I don't know what it is, but it sounds a lot like good luck, the way they say it. Happy. Oh, now I forget. But so they have words like the word for good luck or happiness or something like that. If the words are the same, so they have the 4 tones in China. It's like and I forget what the other one was, but the 4 tones. So they might have a word that's the same word, but one will be said like red or red, and that means 2 different things, right? But they're spelled the same character maybe, and so that's why 8 is a lucky number, because 8 and luck is the same word, and so the license plate with the number 8 on it sold for $1 million in China. Yeah, and that's why you can get red, because red is a lucky number. A lot of superstition.
Yeah.
So very much. So, but they see an enormous subjective value in red things and in walnuts and other things because of what they associate it with, right? So think of like chicken feet. I don't remember why they eat so many chicken feet, but they do. Oh, hey.
I have a quick question about my script from my video presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Can I send you that through email so you can maybe take a look at it?
Yeah, send it. I would probably send it through Canvas, but either one's fine.
Canvas? Okay. Oh yeah.
Message.
Okay.
You could message through Canvas.
Just to see.
Email too. I just won't get back to this. But.
Yeah, just to see if I need to add anything more to it.
Okay. Yeah.
The matrix.
Matrix. That's right.
Thank you.
Cool. The matrix where they live off. Right? So humans have one use. So, but yeah, so they have a subjective value over things, right? Like who here? None of you run. We established that.
No.
No. So how much would you pay for a 5K? Big fat zero?
Yeah, no. You wouldn't get to that.
Even a 5K, it's only 3 miles. Come on.
I don't even do 1 mile.
I was in here yesterday and I was looking out here and I saw people running back and forth. And I was like, oh, I wonder if that's the track team. I went out there and sure enough, it's the track team. I think they train at 12 o'clock. And the distance at 2 o'clock. So at 2 o'clock, the distance guys will be out there.
Oh, I know her.
Is she on
She's
cross country?
So sweet.
What?
Cross country?
Yes. I don't know what she does. She does long distance.
She's so fit. I don't know how she does it.
Ridiculous. She's like Miss Tulare County.
She's like the sweetest girl you'll ever meet. Like,
I want to go out there at 2 o'clock and meet them because I had a student, Jessie, who was in this class, the 40 class, not this class, but, and she had like 20 credits or something. She had to drop. She's taking it next semester, but I knew her, but I guess she tweaked a hip flexor strain. But I think they have state is tomorrow. Or this weekend. So I know the Pac-12 Conference Championship is in Seattle tomorrow, and I was like, oh, damn it, I missed it. I was right there too, because it's not often that you get it in Seattle or somewhere close to home, you know. I really wanted to see that, and I know last weekend that COS was in Salina Beach. So Salinas, not Solana Beach, Salinas. So I was like, oh, it's too far. It's like 3 hour drive. I'm not going to go there for that. I would have liked to have watched it. But again, subjective value. I am willing to pay money to run, right? Most people are not willing to be paid to run, right? So
you have to pay me a large amount, but I won't guarantee I'll win either.
So your friend Elizabeth is probably willing to pay money to run. She obviously gives up a lot. If she's good, she's going to be sacrificing a lot of time and effort and probably money as well to be a good runner. Takes a lot. It takes a lot of pain, right? I mean, you believe me, I know running pain because I've got lots of injuries, right? So. So yeah, subjective value is a very important aspect of Austrian economic theory. And this is the basis for trade. You know, I value what you have more than you do, and you value what I have more than I do. And so we should trade, right? Or more specifically, I have a $10 bill. It goes back to that movie, or the first discussion board with Walter Williams, Dr. Walter Williams talking about the butcher. And in fact, for you guys, this will be a final question, by the way. Okay. So think about, so this is a big benefit to you, right? So I actually brought this up on Tuesday, I think, and I didn't quite finish it, but counterfeiting. The morality or immorality or amorality of counterfeiting. What do you guys think?
I actually brought an example of a counterfeit. Do you want to see it?
You do? Yeah. A purse? No. Or money?
Yeah.
They have a lot of. So people, when I say counterfeiting, they tend to think
Where'd you
of
get
money.
that, Carlos?
No. It's my work. I promise.
I'm just kidding.
Okay, you can feel
That one is really waxy. That 10 though, solid.
So this is from work?
Yeah, people have tried passing them. I got bumped up to a checker, so I get to see all that.
Oh, okay. So what do you do with it? You just keep it, right?
Yeah, we have to keep them.
Can I have it? I'm just kidding.
I think this one has.
Anybody have a real
watermark.
$100 bill? We could.
I did.
I think I have a 10 to compare.
Like college.
It feels like paper.
Right, not money.
Because
And
that's
money-
made out of cotton.
Yeah, this is not actually paper. It's like cotton and linen and stuff. This is just a $1 bill, but
This one even has a watermark. So if you ever like get a bill, that one doesn't. But if you check,
yeah.
don't do that. Just use a scratch pad.
Scratch pad?
Yeah, like. Does anybody have a 10 or 20?
I only got cards.
I got him.
Okay, so
This
like.
one doesn't have the. Well, it's got a fake, but it doesn't have the plastic electronic strip.
Oh no, no one really.
Not real.
It just looks like so pristine too. So I'm
Thanks for
like,
bringing that. Oh, you know what?
It looks really shiny.
let me see.
When I talk money,
Listen,
I always bring. I have a silver dollar that I always bring. I have more than one, but I always bring a silver dollar to compare. So you can have like a silver dollar, a fake silver dollar, which
Look at how
is
printed.
it's a dollar coin, but
Yeah.
it's just not silver. So silver dollar is 1964 and 4, and then you have the modern ones, which are just pot metal, and then like a dollar bill, and you can like tell the difference between the various kinds. So-
Look at how like the ones like all
See, I always thought if you're going to print fake money, it should be $1 bills because people don't pay attention to them. Ones
yeah,
and fives.
but it would cost more. to print.
Yeah, it could, yeah.
yeah. It looks like something you get out of a game.
Yeah, the number one thing you should check for when you're checking a bill though is the scratch pad because everything else can be counterfeited, especially the pen. Like, the pen is the worst test you could ever do because you could put hairspray on paper and it'll pass the pen test.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like the best thing. You could
Thanks
do.
for telling me that. I just kidding. It's good to know.
Yeah, but like,
It's
so you guys.
cut wrong.
I know, that's
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
would
Cut
That's
on
what I
top.
thought, yeah. I thought it was kind of weird on top. Doesn't look right.
I think that one has like a better chance of passing than that one.
Yeah,
I
so
feel like I know what a $10 bill looks like. And I know what a $100 bill looks like. So I'm like,
You use
this
some like
this looks like a cardboard
some
game.
like social engineering, you know, like, hey, oh, by the way, where's your bathroom? And they're like, oh, it's over there. They're not paying attention.
yeah, so get people distracted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one's really waxy though.
Or you put it in like, if you're going to buy something, you know, and you have 2 other hundreds, you stack that in the middle, they see 3 and they feel the top and bottom, you know, but they still see 3.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's smart.
You know, a lot
Don't
of
do
people,
it, but
just like
it's
kind of
smart.
spread the money apart. They don't actual individual bills.
I think the best one though is watch them. Like you pay with a real $100 bill, and then they give you a bunch of change. You know, actually, you can have 2 5s. They just give you 2 5s back because they assume that they just gave you this $10 bill. You get it?
What was that?
Oh,
I go in the
You pay with real money, and then
Oh,
they give
right,
you,
right.
They give you your change,
and
and then you're about to put it in, but you actually can have 2 5s, and then they give you 2 5s back because they think that they just gave you this $10 bill.
Yeah, because you just
That's
kind of
so-
switch.
There's like all these little tricks. Holy crap.
The honest person, I don't think about that.
I know what's
Yeah.
counterfeit. Like, what's counterfeit
That's a lot of
money?
risk for $10 though.
Yeah,
This is more of like a discounted price. The hundreds though, you could probably make a lot of money.
yeah. If you were able to pass those around, but yeah, it's about distracting people. Getting there's a lot of different criminals are very creative. That's what we do know. But now think about if I've got that $100 bill and I go out to where do you live?
Town and Country. It's a grocery place in Porterville.
Okay, Porterville somewhere around there.
It's like 30 miles south.
Okay, so it's a ways. Is it
It's
down?
on your way to Bakersfield.
On your way to-
It's
okay.
between here and Bakersfield.
I know McFarland. I stopped in McFarland on my way down because
Just because they're running
Because
movie.
of
the movie. Yeah, exactly.
That's the only reason people stop in the studio.
I was able to go to that movie. They gave us a free preview for our running group. So
Oh,
I thought it was. I love great movie. It was very Hollywood, 80s Disney like, but still because as a running fan, it was near and dear to my heart. I enjoyed
it.
Wasn't Kevin Costner the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coach.
He went to Mount Whitney.
High school?
High school around here.
I didn't know that. Oh, wait, here?
Yes,
Yeah.
here.
He's from here
Yeah.
Well, he like moved here.
when he was a kid.
You'd have to look it up. I feel like he only went here for high school.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Still,
when he
it's-
was that age. But yeah, that's like
Oh.
the one
If
claim
I
to
said he
fame.
claimed
That's
to
the
fame.
one aim to fame that they have.
So, but
I didn't get a message. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, just gonna say with the idea of counterfeiting, right? Is it moral, immoral, and why?
It's completely
It's
immoral.
lying. Like,
lying?
it's cheating.
How could you make the claim that it's moral?
Well, you.
I worked for it.
Obviously. I
Wait,
mean,
is
Yeah, I
it-
worked
is
really
it-
hard for
is
that
it
counterfeit, man.
Nothing. It's like no different than spending another 100. Because after, let's say that he actually took the 100 and it was, I made the perfect $100 bill. Nobody could tell the difference.
If you make a 1-to-1, you pretty much don't tell anybody about it because they're just going to be in currency. They're going to be handed out multiple times. You actually just like printed actual money. You can probably contribute to inflation if you're that big.
Yeah, so there's two things. One is kind of the, now, if I were to print perfect money, I probably could not spend it fast enough to be actually inflationary. But in theory, yes. One, it is inflationary, right? By definition, you're creating